Yeah. Okay. So this is one of the very important concept. Not just important. I think the mandatory um, skill that everybody, whoever works with Python, whether they are developers, Python developers, or the automation testers who is using Python for their automation, with irrespective of the tool. Okay, so with irrespective of like whether you are using Selenium, you're using Playwright, or you're using some XYZ tool that uses Python. Okay, so this is not just related only with the you know Selenium. Okay, so any automation tester, whoever uses Python, and in fact, if you are a Python developer also, this is the mandatory skill that you should have. So the minimum. Okay, so that's called PyTest. So, what is a PyTest? And as I told, this, even for the developers and even for the automation testers, this has been a mandatory skill. Okay, so that's what that I'm telling. Why it is, important for the developers? Because, okay, so I don't know how many of you know, like, okay, so there will be two types of testings that we will be having normally. So something called white box testing, we call it as, and something called black box testing, right? So black box testing. So there will be two types of testings that we will have. Forget the gray box, that's only the theoretical. Okay. So now, when it comes to the white box testing, this will be done by the developers. White box testing will be done by the developers normally. That is code level testing, right? So code level testing. So that means they will be doing their testing at code level. In that, so one of the key component of white box testing is the key type is something called unit testing. How many of you are aware of what is mean by unit testing? So have you guys know what is mean by unit testing? Hmm? So yeah, this is normally done by the developers. Unit testing is normally done by the developers, whereas so whatever the code that they have written, right? So they will be testing their code. So they divide their code into the individual pieces of components, and they will be testing every individual piece and every individual function that what they have made. Okay, so unit testing is one of the necessary practice that every developer must and should follow. So before they say that their code, they have done with the coding, and they have to make sure that they have done unit testing of their code. Okay, so even whether you are a Python developer, you are a Java developer, C# developer and all, then it is very, very important for you to do the unit testing. So whatever the code you have written, every function you have written, that has to be individually tested, making sure that, okay, so everything is being implemented in that particular piece of functionality. Okay, so if you want to perform the unit testing, like if you are a Python developer and then if you want to do the unit testing of your code, then you will be using PyTest for that. Okay, so and if you are a Java developer, then alternate to the PyTest, we have something called TestNG or JUnit. Okay, we have something called JUnit and TestNG in Java. And if you are a .NET developer, then we will be calling it as a NUnit. Okay, so we will be calling it as NUnit. Okay, so in Python, then we will be calling it as PyTest. There is another framework, inbuilt framework for the Python that's called as a Py, unit. But okay, so PyUnit is very, very limited, and then we will be using PyTest. Now, if you are an automation tester, okay, so if you are a developer, then if you want to do the unit testing, then you will be using PyTest. If you are an automation tester, if you want to define your test cases, automation test cases, and if you want to execute your automation scripts and all, then PyTest is a mandatory almost. Okay, now that means that you can, does it mean that I can't implement the automation without using a PyTest? But okay, so not like that. Okay, so you it's not like that. Okay, so you can't implement automation without PyTest, but you can still implement the automation. Okay, so without PyTest also, but with a lot of limitations, lot of drawbacks. So if you don't use PyTest, and you can still, implement the automation, but you will have to, go with a lot of limitations, right? You have to limit your automation, and you have to face a lot of challenges in order to execute your test cases and all. Now, so let us understand. Okay, so just now, we'll do some basic here. So we'll do some basic, coding without PyTest, and then understand. Okay, so what is the importance of the PyTest first? Okay, so first, okay, so without PyTest, let us go. Now assume that, okay, so you are writing automation scripts. Okay, so you are writing automation scripts. Yeah. So now assume that normally what we will be doing is in the reality. Okay, so what we will be doing in the reality is for each test case we automate, then we will be creating one method or one function. So every test case is created by, okay, so a function normally one okay, so for one test case, then we will be writing one function during the implementation. Whatever the flow that the test case will have, then we'll be writing the code inside the function. Okay, now. So now assume that I am writing certain test cases. Now let's say diff, I'll say tc1. I'm implementing the test cases here. So then I'll say print of, okay, so test case 1. Now let me implement more and more test cases. Then consider that one function here is one test case. I have written the test cases. What I need is here, I want to run these test cases. Assume that I just want to run these test cases. Okay. So how do you run the test cases? Now all of you know that, okay, so since you already know the Python, right? So if I run this test case, if I run this, file now, py file, okay, if you run this, will all these test cases get executed automatically? Will all these test cases get executed or will not be executed? Now let me run this. You see that nothing has been executed. Nothing has been executed here. Now they are normally actually individual functions now. Every test case is just a function. But okay, so since you already know the Python basics already, the question is for you. Will the function directly executed without calling it? Will the function directly executed without, okay, so calling it? No, right? So we are not using PyTest here. We are not using PyTest here. So I'm just, okay, implementing without PyTest. I'm implementing without PyTest. Okay. So now what we have to do is here, we will have to, right? We will have to, if you want to run these test cases, if you want to run these test cases, then you will have to call all these test cases manually, right? So you will have to call all the test cases manually again, right? So then, okay, so what I have to do? Okay, so I'll say I have to call every test case, tc2, tc3. So whatever the test cases that I want to, okay, so run, then I must have to call them. So if you don't call them, then they will not be executed, right? So see, right? Okay, so the time that it is being taken for me. Okay, so now if I run this, then they will be executed. You can see, right? And so if you don't use PyTest, what you have to do, you still write the test cases. Then okay, so you in the form of functions. So every test case will be in the form of function. You still write the test cases. But the problem is you will not be able to execute them until unless you call. But now, like, these are just 8 test cases, so that I was able to call. In less time, then I can refer those functions for calling. But assume that you have 200 test cases. You want to run 200 test cases. And if you want to run those 200 test cases, right? How difficult it is to call all those 200 functions in a flow? How much time it will take for us to, call all those 200 functions? Will it be easy for us? No, right? Okay. See, if you're not using PyTest or like, okay, so PyUnit, then those are the normal functions only. Though I'm referring it as one function, one test case, but for Python, it is just one normal function. That's it. Now, none of the function will be executed without calling it. Though you are saying that it is a test case only, but Python says that no, it is normal function only. Maybe you have written the code for your test case related code, you might be writing inside that, you might have written inside that, but it is normal function for me. So so Python will not take it as a test case like what you are referring to, but Python will be referring it as a normal function only. Python says that no, I don't execute any of the function until unless you call. Maybe you have 200 test cases. You might need to run all 200 test cases, but what you have to do, you need to run all those 200, you need to call all those 200 test cases, like how I have called now. So it will take a lot of time for me to, call those functions again. Okay. Yeah. So that is one of the challenge that what we have in okay, so if you are not using any of this PyTest or PyUnit and all, okay, and at the same time, now assume that okay, so maybe one more thing is these test cases, do you write in the same py file? No. So when you are implementing automation in your application, you will have different modules. Each module will have different test cases. Then you are going to write the test cases in different py modules. So you are not going to keep all the test cases in the same file. Then you will keep in multiple files and all. Probably you need to run all of them at a time. So that will be one of the key, biggest challenge for you if you are not using this PyTest and all. Okay. Second one is, now see, I have written all 8, I have called all 8 test cases, then it will be running all 8. Okay. But assume that, you have got huge amount of test cases, but out of that, some test cases are related to smoke testing. Some test cases are related to regression testing. Some test cases related to, sanity testing maybe. Some test cases related to like some other purpose. Okay, different suits that what you have. Okay, now I have total maybe some 600 test cases in my overall, automation. So we have got 600 test cases. Some of them related to the regression, some of them related to the smoke, some of them related to a particular category and all. Now I have called all 500 test cases here so that all 500 are being executed now. But next what, okay, so we have is here, the requirement is, no, I don't want to run all 500 test cases. But what I need is now, I want to run only smoke test cases. I just want to run, there could be some 20, 30 test cases out of all, then I want to run only smoke related smoke testing for, test cases. Or I want to run only regression related test cases. Or I want to run the test cases which related to particular module only. Or I want to run the test cases which are related to particular, like let's say, for example, you have automated Amazon application. You have different scenarios like cart related, filter related, product configuration related, checkout related, payment related, right? And, inventory related test cases, profile related test cases, offer configuration related test cases, coupon configuration related test cases. Like there are plenty. So like some hundreds of test cases you can find in Amazon normally. So now assume that you have written the test cases for all those features and kept it in different files maybe. But now what I want is, I don't want to run all the test cases. I want to run only payment related test cases. That I want to run only credit in the payment. Again, I say that I want to run only credit card related payment test cases. Or probably, okay, I want to run only offer configuration related test cases. Again, now you called all 500 test cases one by one here. Then if your requirement changed, no, you say that no, for this, this time I don't want to run all 500. I want to run only, okay, payment related, some particular set of test cases only, and remove all 500 calls there. function calls. Now call only now out of 500, identify what test cases are related to the payment, credit card payment, only call them. How difficult for you to, identify what test cases related to the payment here and call them. Tomorrow, no, I don't want payment related. Tomorrow, I want only offer configuration related test cases. Now remove those function calls. Again, make new function calls. Identify out of 500, identify what functions related to the offer configuration, then call only them. Is it easy for you? No, right? This will be a challenging work for you, right? So this will be very challenging. Okay, so it will be very difficult for us, right? So it will be very difficult for us. Getting my point here? Okay. So this is another key challenge for us. Okay. So another limitation and challenge. And at the same time, certain situations, you say that, okay, I have 10 test cases maybe. In 10 test cases, like, okay, so I have some, behavior that, okay, so test case 1, test case 2 is depending on the test case 1. Test case 1 is depending on test case 1. Now, if test case 1 is passed, if test case 1 is executed and passed, then only test case 2 has to be executed. If test case 1 failed, then test case 2 should not be executed. So what I have is here, so one test case is depending on another test case. One flow is depending on another flow. Right? One flow is depending on another flow. If creation is failed, then modification test case should not be executed. If creation is failed, deletion related test case should not be executed, like that. So if you are not using this PyTest and all, then you cannot make these kind of dependencies. So if one functionality is depending on another functionality and all, then it will be very difficult for you to make these kind of dependencies and build the proper flow. Right? Okay. And at the same time, if you want to generate the reports, now even I have to perform the validations in terms of, technical, like we call it as assertions. Okay, so we call it as assertions. So this, in pure Python, so you will not be able to implement the validations. You can write the conditions, but when condition fails, my test case should be marked as failed automatically. If condition passes, then only test case should be marked as passed. So by using PyTest, then you can implement these kind of validations as well, assertions, which will decide whether test case is passed or failed. And also reporting. Now, when you run like this, then it won't give any reporting. Probably it will give console output, but console output cannot be considered as a reporting because you need to generate a report that can be shared with everybody. So which can tell us like what test cases have been executed, what test cases have been passed, what test cases have been failed. You need to get a proper reporting so that, once the execution has been done, then you can generate those report. You can share those reports automatically so that everybody understands what's been executed. So now, okay, you need to write a lot of code to generate the report if you're not using PyTest. But PyTest will give certain plugin for you to generate the reports automatically. Understand how the PyTest is going to help us. And at the same time, sometimes, what you wanted to do is you want to run some test cases. Assume like you have some, 200 test cases. Consider that you have 200 test cases. And each test case is taking at least 10 minutes of time for you to execute. Each test case is, each test case may take at least, 10 minutes for you to execute. Now for 200 test cases, how much time you need? For one test case, it might take approximately an average time of each test case is 10 minutes. Now you have 200 test cases. Now total how much time that it might take? I want in hours. I want in hours. How many hours that it might take? you have like, okay, so 200 test cases, and each test case may take 10 minutes approximately. How many hours that it will take? Approximately 300 hours, sir? No, 30 hours. 30 hours. Yeah, so it could be 30 hours, 34 hours, yeah, 33 hours, you say. Yeah, so it will take 33 hours. But now what I have is I have only 5 hours of time for execution. I have only five hours for executing the test cases. You have to run all the test cases now, but you have only 5 hours time. So you have got only 5 hours time for execution. So what do you do now? It will be difficult to complete, right? But if you are using PyTest, then what you can do? So if you are using PyTest, then you can do parallel execution of the test cases. Instead of running one by one test case, you can say at a time, 4 or 5 test cases can be parallelly executed. Okay. Or like you can run some, at least maybe some 5 test cases or 10 test cases parallelly. Or parallelly, okay, all 10 methods should be parallelly executed. So you can reduce the execution time as well. So if you don't use PyTest, then it will be difficult for you to run, this parallel execution. And at the same time, if you are using CI/CD, I don't know how many of you know what is mean by CI/CD, like Jenkins or AWS and all, right? So if you want to do a scheduled execution, and your execution has to be automatically triggered at a particular time in a particular machine, right? So we will be using something called CI/CD integration, continuous integration and continuous deployment. So we will be using something called Jenkins and all for that. So if you want to integrate your automation with such kind of tools, CID tools and all, CI/CD tools and all, then you will be using this PyTest. Okay. See, understand how the PyTest is going to help us in real time for us. That's why I told her, like, if you want to make better automation, then okay, so without using PyTest, I think okay, so that will be very, 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 very difficult for you to make your automation better. Okay, so that's why, okay, so you can say that PyTest is nothing but PyTest is an automation framework or a testing framework, you can say, not just an automation framework, because automation framework means again we do some custom implementation, so which we will be continuously doing now. Okay, so from now on. Okay, so you can say that, yeah, so a PyTest is a testing framework, so which will help you to define the test cases, which can be automatically discovered and executed. And PyTest can be used for executing test cases parallelly and provide a data, perform data driven testing. Like if you want to run your test cases with multiple combinations at a time, then if you want to run your, if you want to make the dependencies between test cases, and if you want to generate the test reports, if you want to do the assertions and all, right? So during the testing, then this PyTest will help us. Okay, and there is another important feature about the PyTest is, let's say, like, okay, when you're running these test cases, and let's say like you have to launch the browser for every test case. So every test case you need to launch the browser. For every test case you need to close the browser, right? Now, if you include this launching browser and closing browser in every test case, then code will be duplicated for every test case, right? Those two steps, if you mention in every test case, then it will be duplicated, right or wrong? So instead of that, what I have to say is here, okay, so there are certain methods, they have to be automatically executed for every test case before the test case starts and before the test case ends. That's called configuration related methods and all. And I don't want to call them, these have to be automatically executed as soon as the test case is called. So you can define such kind of configuration methods using PyTest. Okay, na? So now, yeah, let us start with the PyTest. So PyTest is going to help us. Today, I'm just teaching very, very basics of PyTest. And then, okay, so we will have to, do a deep dive into the PyTest, because people who already attend the interviews, who are already doing an implementation, working and all, they already know what is the importance of the PyTest. Okay, so that's very key and very, very important. Okay, now let me do this and let's see first. Okay, so let me configure the PyTest here. I think I don't have the PyTest configured. Let me configure the PyTest, but just okay. So we will have to start from the installation of PyTest. Okay, so I do have that. So we will have to. So since PyTest is already installed in my system, then it's automatically, found here. So, but we need to install the PyTest. I will show you that installation as well. Okay, so first I'm doing this. Okay, but though I have used a PyTest here, and I'm saying each function is a test case. Okay, so they will not be executed until unless we call them. Then what PyTest is making difference here is, okay, actually, so if you are using a PyTest and all, then if each function has to be considered as a test case, then you must have to follow some naming convention. Okay, so we must have to follow some naming convention. Okay, so PyTest will not discover the functions as a test cases automatically. So if you want PyTest to discover these functions as a test cases, because when you create some hundreds of functions, not all 100 functions are test cases, right? Some functions you just write for some code reusability. Some functions like you will write for some utilities and all, some from data reading purpose or other things and all. So not all the test cases, all the functions are test cases, right? Okay, so you have to make some difference between what test cases need to be considered as what functions need to be considered as test cases, what functions are not required to be considered as test cases. Okay, so now if you want to make any function as a test case, then you have to start the function name. You have to start the function name with test. Remember, function name must be started with test. So whatever the function whatever the function whose name started with the test is considered as a test case. Now, can you see there is a run button next to the test case here? Next to the first function, you got run button automatically. Huh? Now, if I run this, see, I'm not calling test TC1 here. I'm not calling test TC1. Now let me run this. And you can see that, okay, so one test case has been executed. One passed. And the output is here, test case one. Can you see one test case is automatically executed? Why only one? There are 8 test cases right here. Why only one is executed? Because PyTest is taking only one function as a test case here. Because PyTest will follow some naming convention. It will not take all the functions as a test cases by default. Whatever the test cases, the name started with the test, only those test functions, sorry, whatever the functions whose name started with the test, only these functions are considered as test cases. Okay, so now let me do this. Okay, now let me say this. Okay, yeah. So must be started with the test. Now you can see like you got run button for every test case here. Let me run this now, the entire file. How many test cases have been executed? Can you see all test cases have been executed here? I have not called them manually. None of the test case here called manually. I'm see, do you see any of the function is called here separately? Is any function called separately? No, right? Okay. So though I have not, right? So though I have not, called them, but still they have executed. Now, if I want to run one individual test case, you see that then that particular test case, without calling it, I'm able to run the test case directly. Are you guys understanding? You see the difference now without using PyTest and with PyTest. Do you observe the difference? Now you see, either I'm able to run the individual test case, or okay, so I'm able to run all the test cases. See, okay, so now all 8 test cases have been okay. So now wait. So you have to select the current file and then run it. So all test cases have been executed in that file automatically. Okay, but maybe like, okay, so again, go with another scenario where assume that I have around 100 test cases and I want to run only smoke related test cases. So I want to run only smoke related test cases. Or I want to run regression related test cases. Okay. So now see what I'm going to do is, but okay, so you will have to understand this syntax. We will discuss, but this is again, I'm telling that this is just a basic introduction. Okay. So I'm just giving only the basic introduction. These are what I'm doing is normally called as a markers. Okay. Okay. Now what I did is for each test case, I just given some marker here. But okay, so don't think too much about it. So you will understand all these things. Okay, one by one. Okay, so you will be learning it. Okay, now see what I'm going to do is I'll be running these test cases using a certain command. I'll say command is PyTest -em. Then I will be using sanity. No test cases have been found. 1 minute, 1 minute. Give me a moment. Okay, so I'm defining some markers. Okay, so this is configuration that I'm doing here. Yes. 1 minute. Okay, so I'm just defining the markers here. It's supposed to execute now. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was giving uppercase later. Okay, fine. Yeah, I'm good. Okay, so I'm sorry. So you have to make sure. Okay, so now we can see all 8 test cases have been passed here, but there is no printing message. But we will see the printing and all. But you see, can you see all 8 test cases have been passed? Now let's say here I will run only the regression, okay, or I will run only smoke. I will run only smoke. So how many test cases we have in smoke? How many test cases we have in smoke? Restarting PyCharm, okay, so no, it was like just a naming convention. So because if you have, if you're using PyTest and if you want to run through the command and all, then even file names also should start with test. Even your class name also should start with test. Okay, so we have given only the method names, but even your okay, so file name also should start with test. That's it. Okay. See, now out of this, how many test cases we have for smoke? Out of 8? Two, right? Okay. So then, yeah. So if I want to run regression, you see that you can run it either in, double quotes or without double quote also you can do. Can I see only 5 test cases have been executed? Yeah, you can see test case 2, test case 5, test case 7, test case 8, and test case 1 have been executed. So 3 have been deselected, and then 5 has been selected. So if you want to run those, what is -s, -em, then I will be explaining further. Okay. So then I'll say sanity. One test case has been executed. That is test case 6. That is a sanity. This is called marker. Okay. So this is called marker. Now I understand. Okay. So the purpose of the, uh, PyTest here. So how the PyTest is making a difference now. Right? So if you're using PyTest here, so you're able to run all the test cases, or you want to run particular test cases only. So now, okay, so whatever the test cases you wanted to run, and you might have like, okay, so some hundreds of test cases, but you can simply, run the selected test cases. So by using markers, you can mark which test case is what category. Okay, so you can easily group the test cases using markers, like all regression test cases, all smoke test cases, all sanity test cases, like that. You can group the test cases and then you can run the test cases related to particular group. Are you guys understanding? Okay, so now let me do this first. If you want to install the PyTest, then what you have to do is go to terminal or command prompt, or terminal. Okay, so in your system, okay, go to terminal, and so then you say which PyTest. So if you say which PyTest, then it will tell you where the PyTest has been configured, and then the version of the PyTest that's been installed. Now I will uninstall PyTest here. So pip3 uninstall PyTest. So I'm removing the PyTest from my system right now. And again, if I use which PyTest, then it says that PyTest not found. Okay, then what you have to do, pip3. If you are using older version of Python, then use pip, okay, not pip3. Pip install PyTest. The PyTest has been installed. That's it. Then you have to, in your project, then how you configured the Selenium earlier. So go to the settings, and then, okay, so you have to select one. Okay, so if you have to configure PyTest again. Okay, so how do you configure the PyTest? Go to the settings and go to the project, and then your project name, select Python interpreter, So click on install here and search for the PyTest. Then you will have to select the PyTest and then you have to click on install package. Okay. And then you have to import PyTest. Then you will be able to define the test cases. Is it clear right now? So how to define the test cases in PyTest? How to install PyTest? Huh? But if you observe, like I'm creating something called pytest.ini, and there will be huge things like, we have to discuss further. Okay, so from tomorrow onwards, then, I will be doing that.